I feel like it's just very similar to an in-person meeting. Having one person lead the meeting, whoever is best suited for that takes control. And I think the best way to be engaged is having everyone to have their cameras on and be 100% there in the meeting.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, and this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. For many professionals, some portion of their day, if not their entire day, is spent in the virtual realm. Whether we're presenting webinars on GoToMeeting, or going to client meetings on Teams, or holding calls with our teams on Zoom, preparing for remote or virtual experiences often involves more planning than maybe just deciding what flavor bagels to have in the conference room for tomorrow morning's meeting. Joining me to discuss how we can more effectively engage with others in the virtual world is Howie Zales. Howie is an Emmy Awarded camera operator who started his career at the NFL Network and NBC Sports. His passion for broadcasting led him to found Viridity Entertainment Services, a streaming and professionally recorded in-house production service offering TV quality live stream to corporations. Their clients include T-Mobile, Capital One, the Food Network, and hip-hop group Salt-N-Pepa. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Howie.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you joining me. So let's just start with the basics. A lot of people are kind of still uncertain 3 years after the pandemic and everybody went remote, but they're still uncertain about how to present themselves on camera. So, how to frame the camera, what to wear, what should their background look like. And a lot of us are working, sometime or all of the time out of our homes. And so you've got all those distractions. So let me just squeeze some free consulting out of you while you're here. What am I doing right or wrong so far? And what are the other considerations that professionals ought to really consider when they're trying to maximize how effective they are just on camera?
Yeah, no, I think your setup looks great. It kind of looks similar to mine. My background is peel and stick wallpaper from one of the big box stores. My wife and I didn't even get divorced putting it up. It went on nice and simple, and right to the right and left of me is where it ends, and it goes on nice and simple, and you can change it whenever you want, and I highly recommend it.
You're so much smarter than me, because when we went remote, I saw this stuff at Lowe's, and this is actual plank. And it took me,
Okay.
I ended up spending more money on tools to install this crap than, and I still have 10 fingers and most of my toes, but it's a small miracle. And I wish I'd known they'd had basically shelf liner to do that, because that would make my life so much easier. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so easy.
But that background, why is a background like that helpful versus just a plain wall or something else?
Yeah. So to answer your question, you never want to have like a white wall behind you, because let's just say most people are going to have some sort of web camera. The web camera is designed with the electronics that it's going to see the white wall, and it's going to make the overall picture darker because white absorbs the light, and it's going to think that the camera shot is very bright because of the white wall. So if you have anything other than a white wall, it helps the camera, figure out that the shot is not overexposed.
Yeah, and that's where and so you see people coming in and out of focus and those kind of things like that. Okay.
And you never want to have a camera, or you never want to have the setting of your camera in autofocus, because if you go like this, then the camera's going to adjust for focus. You never want to have the setting of your camera on autofocus. And usually that's a setting within the app that comes with the camera that you're using.
Okay, so what else? Well, while we're talking about backgrounds, a lot of my guests have bookcases full of tchotchkes and books and stuff in the background. Pros or cons of those kind of backgrounds?
As long as it's not like right over their shoulder where it's just as much in focus as as your eyeballs are in focus, because then it gets distracting, right? You want to be far enough away from your background where your background kind of falls out of focus, and you can help that with a better camera than just a webcam. I'm using a Canon C500, which is a professional grade camera with a prime lens on it. And a prime lens is a lens that basically does not zoom in or out. It just, you have to physically pick the camera up and go in or out to get your to fix the camera shot. But I'm a professional camera operator, so that's one end that most people will not go to. But you definitely can, there are things you can do with prosumer type cameras and lenses to make your camera shot just look more professional. And doing that and having the background fall out of focus will definitely help you achieve that.
Okay, so another thing that I'm always concerned about is lighting. My office is upstairs here in my home, and I've got south facing sun most of the time. And so I'm constantly adjusting the amount of light that I am getting through the windows versus my artificial light on this side. How important is lighting? Is that primarily a focusing thing, or is it also not looking like a zombie kind of thing?
No, lighting is hugely important. I always say if you don't look good and sound good, then it's going to take away from what you're saying. And looking good is part of 50% of that or more is the lighting. You want to try to stay away from setting up near a window. If you have to be near a window, if you can have some sort of blackout, that you can control on the window to, because if it's very sunny, then that side of your face is going to be overexposed, and there's really no way to compensate that on the other side of your face with lighting. I'm in a very controlled environment where I have 3-point lighting. So I have a light on this side that's lighting this side of my face, a light on that side, which is lighting this side of my face, and a light above me,
Hmm.
which is lighting my head and my shoulders, which helps the separation from the background.
Interesting. Okay. You mentioned cameras, and I think a lot of folks are using still the built-in camera on their laptop or whatever, so you get a good view of their nostrils. And what about camera placement? Where what's the best way? Because like I've got two monitors here, and I've got my camera
Mhm.
between the two monitors. But so either I'm looking at my guest, here, and it feels like, or I'm looking at my notes over here, and so I'm rarely like lined up. How important is that versus attitude and altitude?
Yeah, you really want your camera dead center in the middle of the screen that you're looking at. So you're, kind of looking into the lens of the camera. You don't want too much room above your head, and you don't want to be, the camera shooting up at you. One way to help achieve that is a computer stand, where you put the computer on the stand so the camera is more eye level with you.
Okay. And so, what about mics? How important are different mics? I'm still surprised by how many guests we do, and our producer Rob will do a tech run through with them. And 3 years into the pandemic, they're still, for I guess all their calls, still using the onboard mic on their laptops, and that for our quality
Oy.
standards doesn't sound good. So, how do you pick a mic? What do you suggest? How do you
Yeah.
evaluate that?
So we do a lot of live streaming, virtual live streaming. We send out these remote capture kits, we call them, or contributor kits. So what we recommend and what we send out are some sort of Yeti Blue mic, USB microphone that plugs directly into your computer, and you can buy any brand headsets that has a 1/4 inch plug that goes into the bottom of the microphone. So it's an all-in-one situation. I have a professional grade microphone, which is not necessary for everyone, but the Yeti Blue mics work great.
Okay, so but a USB mic makes a bigger difference, and
Yeah,
than
absolutely. And you never want to use any sort of Bluetooth device. especially if you're going to be part of a panel or a LinkedIn Live or anything like that, because if you forgot to charge them, or if you don't know how to pair your headsets well with your computer, sometimes they become unpaired and it becomes very difficult to pair. And in the panic of the last second, it becomes impossible. And if there's a tech person on the other side trying to help you, they don't know what you're dealing with. So if you have a wired device like a USB, prosumer type microphone, it's definitely the best situation.
And then the other thing is like, what do I wear? Is in person it really doesn't matter. As you know, I mean, you could still look like a goober because you're wearing something that doesn't match or anything else. But on camera, you hear a lot of advice about stuff. But what's your take on how to present on camera as far as what you wear?
Never white,
Ah,
kind of like
okay.
the background. Unless you're going to wear a jacket, like a sports jacket for men, or some sort of jacket sweater for women that will cover a lot of the white. Um, and you want to stay away from patterns that will cause the camera. The word we use is called moire, where it looks like it's dancing
Mm.
the outfit of what you're wearing. So any tightly woven patterns that are make the camera, just can't handle the image.
What about stripes? And
Stripes are
insurance?
fine.
Are they okay?
Yeah, yeah,
I would say that's one of the things that I hear a lot is don't wear stripes on camera. But you say they're not that big of a deal then.
yeah.
Okay, good. Any color considerations, anything like that? Or is it
No,
it's
just
primarily just don't
tend
wear
to.
white? Then that's what you're
Yeah,
really saying,
and
huh? Okay.
I would stay away from using the features on some of the apps that cause like do a chroma key where you're like put yourself in a different background, because that's to me is just extremely annoying because it's done electronically than how it's done how it's supposed to be done, where you're keying out the green or the blue, and it never looks right, and it's more annoying to people than it being look than it looks good.
Yeah, and I know some people who are working from home may not have the ability to have a background, or maybe their back is facing an open room and they want the privacy, so they use like on Zoom the blur background. But the weirder the background, I think the more distracting it is during the conversation.
Totally,
And then they
totally.
turn their head a little bit and their ear disappears or things, and I think that those kind of I still see a lot of that.
Yeah, it's definitely annoying, and it takes away from the meeting, and it makes you look, a little less unprofessional. That's just my take on it.
Okay, so from the set and setting, the technical aspect, anything else that we should make sure we cover when we're just setting up our own workspace?
Yeah, I think you just want to approach each meeting with enough time to get yourself set up, because you can always run into a technical problem, especially when you're using computer, internet, cameras. If your meeting is, always allow 15 extra minutes. For this podcast, I came down and made sure I was set up a half hour before, make sure there was no technical problems, and then I walked away until a few minutes before I needed to be in front of the camera.
Yeah, and we've definitely I didn't, we were all Wi-Fi, everybody's on Wi-Fi and all of that, but I had because it got a little glitchy on a couple occasions early on in the pandemic. I had hardwired internet run up to my office
Yeah,
here at the house, just one less failure point, and sometimes Wi-Fi just doesn't work as well as a hardline connection.
that's as a company that does live streams for a living, that's our biggest problem is people's internet speeds. More people have bad internet than people have good internet, and when you're doing uh, a virtual meeting or some sort of conference like that, it's the upload speed you need to worry about. And a lot of these internet providers sell you on, the download speed, but they never tell you what the upload speed is, and that's what you really need in order to have a good internet connection for meetings. Um, Anything less than a 10 to 20 upload speed is absolutely subpar.
Yeah, and just because you can watch Netflix or Hulu on your Wi-Fi doesn't mean that
Do you have
you're not going to have lag on in your conversations on
correct?
virtual meetings.
Yeah, and people have a very people are not educated in terms of what is good internet speed.
So we figured out, okay, here's how I present myself, and here's, I've got my setup and I've got my lighting right. Now, the other part though is I'm still talking to this person who may be 15 or 1500 miles away over an internet connection. It's not the
Right.
same as sitting in my office back in the old, in the old workspace, having just a one-on-one conversation. So and the value of those in-person meetings was always that personal connection. And that seems more difficult here in the virtual world. How can we plan our meetings, those one-on-ones or those really small group team meetings, so that we have better connection and they're effective?
Yeah, I feel like having enough time for those meetings, not scheduling meetings back to back to back to back, right? Just because it can be done in the virtual space doesn't mean it has to be done that way. Giving people time to get something to eat, go to the bathroom in between meetings, things like that, definitely helps. And just because we can do virtual meetings doesn't mean it that's the best way to solve a situation.
And what about connecting with somebody? I mean, any tips on how to structure the meeting, or how to be more engaging in a conversation that's remote where we're not in the same room?
Yeah, I think having one person and it's I feel like it's just very similar to an in-person meeting. Having one person lead the meeting, whoever is best suited for that takes control. And having if everyone I think the best way to be engaged is having everyone to have their cameras on and be 100% there in the meeting.
That's, I think, the cameras on versus cameras off is you're not in the HR world, but in the HR discussion board world on Facebook and LinkedIn, that's always a hot topic.
I
Is
know it
is
is.
is cameras on, cameras off, and there's a very loud and anti cameras on group that really pushes that. You know, uh, people are uncomfortable being on camera, and so we shouldn't force employees to do that. But I think I agree with you. I can connect. I've got an idea of what somebody's going. At least where their eyes are tracking, that they're paying attention, that they're engaged. They're not reading their email, because as soon as I'm camera off, my first instinct is to multitask.
What else can I be doing?
Right.
And that's mine as well, and I feel like, and this comes from my personal view, is if my camera's on, I'm paying more and better attention to the meeting in front of me.
Yeah. And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, premium background checks with fast and friendly service. I'm often asked by HR pros who aren't Imperative clients whether I have any resources to help them understand the background checks they receive from their screening partners. Like, what do these abbreviations even mean? Or what different legal terms like deferred adjudication or plea and bar mean? It's clear that they are simply confused by the information they're getting back from their background check partner. The problem is that the court's records were never designed for a layperson to make sense of them. Their computers are full of abbreviations, numerical references to penal code statutes, and just legal system jargon. And most screening companies just dump that raw information in their clients' laps. At Imperative, our goal is to help our clients make well-informed people decisions. And that's why, rather than just scraping information off the court's computer screens, every report delivered by Imperative is actually written in plain English by a well-trained analyst. Our goal is that our reports are so easy to understand that our clients never have to do their own research to make sense of them. That seems kind of like a low standard to me, but apparently a lot of screening companies don't make that a priority. And if the simple act of making the reports comprehensible isn't a priority, I have to question the quality of the rest of their research and customer service. If you'd like to explore how Imperative can help you make well-informed decisions about the people you involve in your business, please reach out to us at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 117 and enter the keyword virtual. That's VIRTUAL. And now back to my conversation with Howie Zales. So, Zoom and Teams that have whiteboards and the ability to share screens, and screen shares are okay as long as you don't have inappropriate stuff on your screens. And we've seen some cases where you saw that case where the sales guys were rating the attractiveness of the woman that they were making a sales call on, and one of them accidentally shared his screen, and she saw the chat. But so, what about screen shares, whiteboards, in those smaller meetings? Are there ways to use those to be effective?
I'm sure there are. I don't really use them too much, so I can't really offer too much info on how to be effective with that, or what really it can add. But I'm sure there are ways.
And I think the other thing is agendas. Like an in-person meeting, and an agenda is important, and everybody knows where we're going.
Yeah, I feel like handling a virtual meeting as if you were handling the meeting in person the same way. Agendas, what's the topic, who's going to be speaking, what's to be expected will definitely help.
And in my team's team meetings, which could be, depending on the team, anywhere from a dozen to 4 or 5, we start them all out, our weekly meetings, team meetings, with a segue, kind of just a personal catch up, so that we are kind of connecting, what was your high point this week, or what do you want to share? And we keep them pretty short because I don't want to spend 30 minutes doing that, but at least it feels like we connect a little better. And it's,
Right.
You don't have, because we don't have the water cooler talk like we used to. So this is at least a way to connect in that meeting. But again, we keep it, fairly short, because I've been in those meetings where we spend an hour doing that and then the meeting's over.
Right.
So when the meeting gets larger, when we're having, a larger group, or, we're trying to do brainstorming sessions or things like that, and we want to actually, either educate and a large group, but still have interaction, or solve a problem as a part of a larger group. Those are different kind of meetings, I would guess. What's your recommendations for how we handle those kind of meetings?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe designate someone to take notes or record it, have it transcribed. Um, Definitely would help out in that sort of way.
How do you figure in those large settings, you often have people talking over each other, or people hesitant to speak up because they don't want to be the guy who steps on somebody else's toes? How do you designate who's going to talk when? How do you propose to do that?
And this is like a meeting you're
Yeah, like a
talking
larger
about?
group event. Yeah.
Yeah. You could have one person that's, their function is to go through the guests of the meeting and figure out who's next. You kind of lay the ground rules of the meeting. There's the function in some of the apps to raise your hand if you want to speak next, or it can be done in the chat. And there could be one person that's their function, is to figure out who's going to talk next.
And in those larger groups where you may have 30 or more people, how important do you think it is to have cameras on there for participants who aren't actively speaking or contributing at that particular moment.
Yeah, that could be a situation where maybe not having your camera on would be probably more beneficial because it could be distracting, especially if someone is not as an important player in the meeting, although they have to be there, but they're not as an important player. But um, maybe it's not necessary for everyone to have their camera on, just the people that are most important or the moderators or whatever the situation might be.
And a lot of these meetings I've been a part of, they have some sort of session where they'll do breakout rooms.
Mhm.
Um, any best practices in using breakout rooms? Because I've been in them where it wasn't clear. They kind of throw you in a breakout room with four people you don't know, and it's not always clear what we're really supposed to get done or who's in charge or things like that.
Yeah, again, I think like having clear cut instructions or what is the objectives of those breakout rooms, what's to be discussed. The more information that's provided before, I think makes those situations more productive.
So those are the kind of the committee meetings or larger group meetings, but a lot of employers are using the virtual world, the technology and the platforms to deliver training and to hold these other kind of more one-sided events, like we used to use just go to webinar for, something like that, where we just kind of feed the information one direction. And any best practices on that side on holding those kind of events?
Yeah. So, and that's what our company specializes in, is those bigger type of events where there's a lot of technology involved, where the company is, let's say it's a corporate meeting and they're trying to get all the information out to their investors or to their employees that are scattered all over the world. And the best practices is to bring in a company that this is what they do, have them handle the tech side production of this production, so everything goes off without a hitch. We do these we call them hybrid meetings, where some people are there, some of the speakers are there, some of the speakers are halfway around the world. It doesn't matter, and we help our clients produce these meetings in a very productive and professional way.
Yeah, a lot of the HR associations around the country during COVID went to fully remote, just doing basically webinars. But then they felt like there wasn't enough engagement, so they started either with chat or using not as much the webinar model as the large meeting model and having people there. And it's always that worked. They figured that out, but now that they're back in person, a lot of them are still trying to do a virtual meeting uh, or a hybrid meeting. So they've got people physically in place, and they're still trying to have people Zoom in remote. If you're setting that up, and especially if it's an HR association or a small organization that just wanted to do what they could well, but wasn't going to, on every monthly meeting, hire a company to manage. What kind of suggestions would you make for them to make that hybrid versus and remote and in person event a better experience for the attendees?
Yeah, well, that's where it gets tricky, right? Because you're dealing with a lot of technology, and unless you do this often, and you have a team in place that's good at producing this and knows how, it gets tricky because of all the different technology in place. So my big thing would be to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and make sure that everything in place is set up well in advance to give you the success that you need. But this is what we do for a living,
Mm-hmm.
and we never show up to a production the day of and try to achieve a broadcast or a live stream without coming in the day before or 2 days before, setting up, rehearsing, making sure that we're connecting with whatever countries that we're supposed to be connecting with, that their internet speed is up to the level that we need it, and to ensure that we have a successful broadcast.
How important, in your experience, is it that the remote audience have camera view of the in person audience?
That they see the in-person
Yeah, yeah.
audience?
Is that important at all, or is it just the speaker the primary focus?
Yeah, we'll basically they don't need to really see the faces of the audience. This is up to the client, but this is what we'll do a lot. We'll have one wide shot where you'll see the entire stage and maybe some of the audience,
Like just
and
the
we
back of
call
the
it
heads, kind of the Mystery
yeah, and
Science
we'll
Theater
call it
3000 kind of view. Okay.
yeah, and we'll call it the bailout shot or the wide shot just in case, right? Then we'll have how depending on however many people are speaking, however many cameras we need, and then maybe if there's a question and answer portion of the event, and the client is really inclined for the people to come up to a microphone and be on camera for it to ask their question, then we'll set up a camera in the reverse, shooting that microphone and that area where people can ask questions. But that's a very client specific request.
And of course, there in those cases, I mean, you've got producers on site, working at mixer boards and things to cut stuff, cut from camera to camera and all of that.
Yeah, we come up with a team of people depending on the size of the event, two to four people in person, and then we also have a remote team of people that are working from their home offices because uh, we try to handle most of our productions with as least many people on site and people working the cloud.
Okay. And finally, and this may be a little just because of the size of the events y'all do, but do you have any preferred platforms for, we've got Zoom, we've got Teams, we've got, Riverside for recording our podcast and all these things. Do you have any recommendations as to, at least if not a specific brand, at least we should look for when we're trying to evaluate how to take our enterprise virtual?
Yeah, we don't use any of those platforms. Not to speak negatively against them, but we use more of a professional broadcast uh, software called vMix. Um, it's basically a TV truck in a box. And it allows us to do 8 simultaneous audio mixes so we can have a meeting in 8 different languages. Just to give you an example, we can have 8 remote guests at a time, and we could keep adding on 8 at a time if needed. We can have as many cameras in person as we want. Um, and any unlimited video sources, PowerPoint presentations. We can stream to as many different locations as we need, and we can also output the PowerPoint presentations to the screens in the room if needed.
Okay, well, that may not work for the our recruiting team's meeting, but that's the larger size. So when your team is meeting remote, is that what you use since you've already got that equipment set up? Is that what y'all use for your small meetings,
Yeah,
or
and the good part about what we do and the programs that we use, it's all scalable, right? So we have packages from, $2 to $3,000 to $5,000 to
Mm,
$250,000 events. So it's all what the client needs, and the beauty of our equipment is it can produce anything from the smallest event to still giving very high quality to the largest event. And if you have a fully virtual let's say LinkedIn Live, we send out our computer contributor kits with which are high-end laptops, cameras, ring lights, microphones. And since it's our equipment, as soon as the computer hits the internet, we can dial into the computer, focus the camera, manipulate the audio, color correct the camera. So it just looks professional and it's done in a professional way. And
perfect.
it
So
doesn't have to cost
Right.
$250,000.
And so, yeah, especially as we plan larger events and those kind of special that got to get it right every time kind of events, shareholder meetings,
Mhm.
all hand meetings with employees, those kind of things that we don't want to have to tell Bob, "Hey, Bob, you're on mute," as he goes off and starts his speech. Those kind of things would be, it sounds like that's the getting professional assistance at that level is just a must.
Yeah,
Perfect. Well,
definitely.
thank you, Howie. That's all the time we have, but I appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.